Hello and welcome back to the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. In 1995, Blur released The Great Escape, an album that not only marked the height of the Britpop movement, but also reflected the cultural and musical shift of Britain in the mid-90s. Coming at the peak of their rivalry with Oasis in the infamous Battle of Britpop, the album saw Blur pushing beyond traditional Britpop boundaries, incorporating lush orchestration, genre experimentation, and character-driven storytelling. Though it became an instant chart success, The Great Escape also hinted at the band's desire to evolve, setting the stage for their later, more experimental work. Joining me to discuss this album is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amorim. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man. How are you?
Good, yeah, very well, thank you. It's been a while for us because we've both been on a little bit of a holiday, haven't we?
Exactly. You had your holidays, I had my holidays.
Exactly,
yeah, and then we're back.
It just seems to perfectly work that we always go away at the same time. So
it was a great escape, wasn't it?
There you go. Very good, very good. Yeah, excellent. Well, let's crack straight on. I mean, I purposely chose this album. So I chose this album today because it's always been in the list because I really enjoy it. But on top of that, we listeners, you'll remember we recently did the Oasis album where we sort of talked about the reunion, the gig coming up, as well as did a album discussion about What's the Story, Morning Glory. So I thought it'd be brilliant in the Battle of Britpop to sort of do the same album that came out in 95, Morning Glory for Oasis and The Great Escape for Blur. So this will be good. It'll be a good little comparative episode. And the research I've done has been really interesting, especially sort of seeing how different these two albums are, but how they both represent the same sort of thing in a way. So yeah, anyway, let's crack on. But before we do, the terms and conditions. If you're listening to us for the first time, please make sure if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, make sure you hit follow so that you're up to date with all of our new episodes. And if you're watching, I should say, on YouTube, then make sure to hit like and subscribe on this video so that you stay up to date with all our new content. So in that vein, let's crack on. The album, as I said, we're doing The Great Escape by Blur. It was released on the 11th of September, 1995, recorded between January and May of the same year at the Maison Rouge and Townhouse Studios in London. The genre is obviously Britpop, and the album is 56 minutes, or almost 57 minutes long, and it was released through the label Food and Virgin, and it was produced by Stephen Street. So yeah, anything you want to start off with? Or should we go
actually, I want to talk about the fact all the Britpop bands seem to, at a certain point, they want to stop being Britpop, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
They want to move on because I think it's the need for survival, isn't it? Like you don't want to be associated with a genre for too long. Yeah.
Do you think that that's the same for Oasis? Because this is going to be a talking point that I had for later. I don't really feel Oasis move on.
Yeah, well, I think, but with them, they would always claim that they always bigger than everyone else, so
they can just do what they want. Yeah, they can continue on Britpop, whereas the smaller bands had to struggle.
I don't think anyone who was part of Britpop likes to be associated with Britpop in a certain way. Like,
not anymore.
Because it belongs to the past. It was great, by the way, but the point is, no one wants to be a part of a movement that is associated with one period in time, and it never happened again.
Yeah,
I think that's, and they all tried to do something slightly different at the end of it in order to survive. Not many bands actually managed to do that.
Yeah,
Blur is one of them.
Good point. Well, in that vein, let's talk about the Battle of Britpop. So for those who watched or listened to the Oasis episode, we gave you a nice, or was it the Foo Fighters one? Or a bit of both, actually. We gave you a nice little history about grunge, because grunge is very important, as Britpop was Britain's response to grunge, because grunge was a little bit too melancholic and depressing and introspective for the Brits. The Brits, we'd just come out of the 80s with Thatcher as Prime Minister, a lot of people in the country very unhappy, and with this newfound optimism for life. Tony Blair was in charge, the economy was doing well, and so Britain, what we call Cool Britannia, there was a little phase at the start of the 90s where people were just like, things are good, things are great. And so Britpop emerged, where it was sort of very distinctly British, clever lyrics, catchy melodies, a focus on British life, class struggles, youth culture, but all whilst being a bit tongue-in-cheek and a bit not so serious.
Yeah, and Blur is really good at being not so serious, aren't they?
Definitely, yeah. So a tiny little bit of background about Blur. They were at the forefront of Britpop along with Oasis and a bunch of other bands, like Pulp and Suede. Their 1994 album Parklife was a massive success because it celebrated British life with upbeat tunes, catchy melodies, and witty lyrics. But now talking about the actual Battle of Britpop, which was Oasis versus Blur.
Yeah.
And this was actually a media-fueled rivalry. I don't think the bands actually had that much problem with each other. I mean, maybe they played up to it as the years went on to try and get a bit more attention. But the interesting thing is that this wasn't a musical battle. This was a cultural battle.
Yeah.
I'll explain why. If you look at Blur, Blur were often seen as kind of like the posh kids in Britpop, art school, middle class, represented by their posh London roots. The music was a bit more introspective, a bit ironic, sort of laced with social commentary. Whereas Oasis came from Manchester, which, if you're generalizing for those who are not from Britain, Manchester is a poorer area than than London. So already, just from where they're from, you've got that distinctive divide. Manchester's very working class, quite poor on itself, and Oasis represented that.
Yeah, and with Blur, you got to consider they lived in London, right? So the thing is, if you're living in London, you got to have a certain amount of money to start with. So that hence them be associated with like the posh side of Britpop. But I think also London's like a cultural like center, isn't it? So it's all about academic degrees and people. Well, theoretically very clever, not always in reality, but in theory, yeah. Supposedly everyone is clever or trying to be clever, or trying to be the best in what they do, whatever. So I think yes, that rivalry, parts of it might have been real, but again, I think it's just like Beatles versus Rolling Stones. Yeah. They were really good friends. They still, like Paul McCartney and Mick Jagger, are still good friends and all this stuff. But they always played into the battle as a way of getting some marketing, isn't it? And it worked, right? It always worked for the Beatles and Stones, and always worked for Blur and Oasis, I guess. And I think it's interesting to see that the singles that they released at the same time was Roll With It by Oasis and Country House by Blur, isn't it? Yeah. Those two songs, they sum up those two bands really well. And the simplicity of Roll With It and the, how can I put it?
Satire?
Yeah, the satire in Country House, isn't it? It's more, it's not like in your face like Roll With It. It's you gotta interpret the lyrics in a certain way. You gotta see it's sarcastic, whilst Roll With It is more like this is what it is, and we're not pretending or whatever. So there's a little bit of that. And I have a question for you. Do you think this is not only the battle of Britpop, but the battle of the North versus the South?
Is that kind of like you said, Beatles v Stones, right? Beatles from Liverpool, Stones from London. The Stones are from. But yeah, I do, and I think people inherently side with where they're from.
Yeah,
and I think without, I agree with you. Without even listening to the music, I think someone from London may be slightly biased initially, and just being like, "Hold on, wait, Blur from London? Well, that's me. So yeah, I'm with Blur." Do you know what I mean? Even if you just had to pick a side.
Well, even the accent is quite evident, isn't it? With Liam Gallagher singing. And if you listen to a Oasis song and listen to Blur, you can kind of tell where they're from.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Yeah. I think you've perfectly summed up what lyrically distinguishes the two bands in this battle of Britpop. You got Blur with very satirical takes on some things, but at the same time quite serious things, like especially we're going to explore the lyrics of this album, but you got isolation, mental health struggles, the hollow pursuit of success, middle class anxieties, all these problems, whereas Oasis were very much rooted in things like I don't know, escapism, self-belief, saying you can do things for yourself. So I feel like Oasis gave the country a much needed boost in terms of screw politics, screw the man, screw the government, do things for yourself. Yeah. Whereas Blur weren't so in your face about it. It was quite subtle, the way they were trying to put away their satirical lyrics.
Do you believe they're less optimistic about life?
I do. And I mean, yes, let's go on to this now.
Mm-hmm.
So as Felipe mentioned, the battle culminated when Country House and Roll With It both came out on the same day. Can you believe it, bro? The same day. Like, that is a proper battle of Britpop. Blur won the single battle, as in Country House went to #1, and I think it sold more that year than Roll With It did. But overall, as we know, What's the Story? Morning Glory has gone on to become one of the most famous and successful British albums of all time, whereas The Great Escape probably hasn't quite reached those heights, I think it's fair to say. But this was a defining moment for the Battle of Britpop, and I'm talking about the release of The Great Escape. But it also signalled the beginning of the end for the Britpop era, and here's why. The lyrical themes of The Great Escape highlight and captured the disillusionment of Britain in the mid-90s, and this is what we're going to talk about.
Right. So the lyrics.
The lyrics, yeah.
Yeah.
This is what we were talking about earlier, about the satirical nature of it. So whilst Oasis and a few other bands were very much, hyped up by the media, Britpop's golden age at this point began to wane. Because people started to, I don't want to say wake up, because I don't think that's very fair to say about the general public, but after you get the optimism, like I was saying about in the early years of the 90s, people started to just see that actually, we're starting to see a bit more of the introspective side of British culture, which is actually the same things they're celebrating, but looking at it from a different angle, which I think Blur did really well. Because the Great Escape is a reflection of this shift. It was a bit more melancholic, a bit more critical. It even criticized the same things that bands like Blur were singing about a few years earlier.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's funny because you can't really call this a concept album. But
but doesn't it feel like one?
It is.
Unbelievable,
for me, normally people wouldn't say it is, but in terms of the lyrics and the album cover, which you have just on your background there, and which is it's all fake, isn't it? You see that guy, with a fake smile, and it's all. I think they were trying to show that we try to escape. What I've got on my background here is a scene from the video clip for Country House, and Country House is this guy. Mind you, they playing a board game in the video that is called Escape from the Rat Race. So basically, it's that illusion that you're going to escape. You're going to be somewhere else. You're not going to be working long hours and feeling miserable. And you're going to finally achieve that point where you have a country house and you can spend your time there.
Yeah.
And it's and they playing the board game in the video. And at the end of the video, everything that happened is just them dreaming about that life, and they just in their small flat. It looks like a small flat in a big building, central London. It's you can't get more rat race than that,
Yeah.
And I think there's an overall view of the how can I put it, common people's lifestyle as something that is really depressing in the end of the day. I think that I just want to, if you're not familiar with the album, go straight to the song Fade Away if you want to understand what the album's all about. Probably not the best song in the album, but the lyrics for me is about the predictability of modern life, especially when you have an average lifestyle. That's what it is. So you have the couple, and the lyrics start with, they stumbled into their lives and in a vague way became man and wife. So it's not even their marriage is something that is meaningful. People stumble into each other, they get married, and then they get jobs, they work long hours, they don't see each other, and they live in an area with people from the same background. They're becoming more and more of the same. And I think that the whole album is about this. This song sums up the album in terms of lyrics. And my favorite line from the album is from the song Arnold Same, which is a reference to Arnold Lane by Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
But this phrase is kind of is I find it really depressing, but it sums up the album. Today will always be tomorrow. That phrase is what sums up the album for me, is the feeling that nothing will ever change, and you just want to pretend it's not happening. And I think my problem with this album is after listening to a lot of songs about that, you feel quite depressed at the end of it. But I think they do it in a kind of there's a bit of comedy to it, isn't it? It's a bit of humor. But
I think the music is upbeat enough for the lyrics to not take such a toll on you. I mean, this isn't Radiohead or Leonard Cohen, where the music and the lyrics are depressing. But it's interesting what you said, that I've got about 4 or 5 different categories of that we can put songs in lyrically. You were talking about, I suppose you could say the emotional struggles of those songs like Fade Away. 2 to add to that, He Thought of Cars and The Universal. Mm-hmm. If you look at He Thought of Cars, it kind of explores these feelings of detachment, confusion. He feels a bit alienated from the world, and what else they do well on this album is that the character stories they create. Yeah. There's several characters throughout the album that are just fantastically done. The Universal, I mean, it definitely reflects sort of like the nature of modern life and how shallow it is. Yeah.
And you have the news, like the newspaper saying, look, it's really crap, but one day we'll get better. So hang on to it.
A hopeful side as well.
Well, it is, but it's not. It feels to me like it's the media lying to you about, just hang on there. We will get better, but we're not offering you any solutions. We're not helping you out.
You keep on going how you've been going.
Yeah.
We're going to try, we'll get you through whatever. Another one of those categories would be isolation and suburban life, which I think is quite interesting because, we've mentioned country house, which is the opposite. They're basically saying that if you get out of the city, get out of your little suburbs and you can be happy. Not Blur, but, some of the song lyrics. Best Days, I like just the title, the idea that your best days are ahead of you, which is just what you said. It's about keeping the people ready, don't worry, keep grinding on, keep doing your 9 to 5 job, keep working hard because the best days are ahead of you. But actually, I think when you look at the lyrics of songs like Best Days, you realize that the track, it reflects on sort of sadness, being lonely, being stuck in a routine, looking back and actually feeling the opposite, that the best days are behind you.
Yeah.
Very interesting, isn't it?
It is, exactly. And it's funny because they mentioned this. Some people might laugh when they say that you're living your best days now, and some people are going to agree.
That's the chorus, isn't it? Other people seem to laugh at you when they say these are the best days of your life.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, there's it's ambiguous, isn't it? Because it could be like what you're saying there is these are the best days of your life. That can be 2 things. You're actually living an amazing time. You might not realize it yet, or your life is not that great. This is the best you're ever going to have.
Yeah.
So that's one take. That's one way of interpreting it. So I thought, I find it. Again, I don't find it really uplifting.
Yeah. But I mean, it's funny. But then, as a counter to that, you've got a song like "Charmless Man." Even from the title, if you dig into the lyrics, you can see more of what it means. But the title gives you a good idea. It's like ridiculing a character that has. I mean, he's got this success, but it all feels a bit superficial. He's wealthy, he's well connected, he's successful, but he lacks character.
Charm.
He lacks charm and character.
Because like his friends are fake, his lifestyle is fake. It's like no one seems to be really interested in that man. People just hang out with him because they're going to get something out of him. And I like that one specifically because I think everyone knows 1 or 2 people like that. Or more. But at least one person exactly like that character, I'm pretty sure everyone knows.
So it's almost like we're getting, we've talked about 5 or 6 songs already lyrically, and you feel some songs are almost taking the mick out of the working class man, some songs are or woman, and some songs are almost taking the mick out of the wealthy man or woman. Others satire the working class person, others satire the working class man, others celebrate the working class man, and others celebrate. It's just everything, isn't it? It's a proper scope of British life in the 90s, which I know we said about Oasis, and we've said this before, but it's a completely different take on it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And when you have that variety of views or takes on those subjects, it means you can't tell what's the band's opinion about anything, which I find amazing.
Great point.
It's like they're not giving you a solution.
It's an observation.
They're not even saying. They're not even. Yes, great. It's like you're just watching life as a movie. Yeah. You're not participating, and you're not trying to change the script. They're not saying, "Look, guys, this is crap. You should do something else." They're also not saying, "Oh, this is great" or whatever. It's just an observation. Yeah, that's a valid point, I guess.
As I already mentioned, the character studies on this are fantastic. It is like you just said, an observation, watching the world go by. Yuko and Hiro. A couple working in a monotonous office job, I think you said this. Is this the song you were referencing
No,
earlier?
no, that was Fade Away. Fade Away is
Well, it's actually
a couple, but that song is a similar story.
It is,
like people sharing a workspace, but they don't know each other. They pretend to know each other. They pretend to have a good time together. They're clearly just working for the company or to make their boss happy or whatever.
Yeah.
And they work in because that's all they can do. And they're not, the thing is about pretending to be happy, which is something that a lot of people do, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think with all those songs, though, for me, especially Country House and Charmless Man, you can see those songs as a movie in your head as you start listening to them. I can see the Charmless Man.
I think most of them, bro. Most of these songs.
I can visualize that. I was listening to this to this album again today on the bus, and I closed my eyes and was like, man, I can see that guy.
Yeah. Excellent. The other category I'm going to mention, and we're only going through this in a lot of detail because I think the lyrics are arguably the most important thing about this album. So the character studies of Mr. Robinson's Quango, Ernald Same, Yuki and Hero, the Charmless Man, and the one I haven't done yet, the criticisms of consumerism and conformity. And this is where I was saying we were attacking, satirizing people who like buying things, especially stereotypes. People stuck in repetitive lives, following your normal social conventions, following your friends, doing what your friends think is cool. It is basically saying, don't conform to what society thinks normal. Do your own thing.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that. And I think,
the other one, which the title was perfect, is It Could Be You, which I think is if I read it, what did my notes say? Yeah, reflective of the lottery culture. And but this is what you said earlier, believing that there will always be something better.
It will happen to you, one day you're going to be rich.
Keep paying your £10 a month to get your lottery ticket because one day it will happen to you, But, are we not guilty of it? You and me, I know we both do the Omaze house draw, don't we? Why not?
I do. This is not an advert. We haven't got paid anyway. By the way, Omaze, if you guys...
Yeah, Omaze. If you want to sponsor this podcast, that'd be absolutely welcome.
Should we just say we're sponsored by Omaze? It's going to make us look better.
I don't want to get sued. I'm the one who gets the emails if we get sued, bro. You just turn up to record. I'm the one who has to deal with that shit. Sorry, but
wait a minute. If you win the Omaze stuff, would you just move to the country? Oh, you are already in the country.
I'm already, I just upgrade my house, yeah.
So you are on the Oasis side. I'm on the Blur side. Is that it?
Not
in terms of lifestyle.
I suppose, and locally, in terms of where we are in the country. But anyway, all good for the lyrics and themes. Yeah, excellent.
Let's move on to the next topic.
To the musical innovation and experimentation, because this is what makes this album so important. If the album was just a bunch of great lyrics over standard Britpop music, then I don't think it would have the same reach, legacy, and success as it did have. On top of what they've done lyrically, which as we've just discussed is fantastic, they've done a bunch of stuff musically as well, which I think is fantastic. And the same thing, I've got a couple of sections. So I've got orchestration and expansive production. Songs like The Universal starts off orchestrally, carries on, strings the whole way through, orchestras in is it in Country House? Yeah, Country House, you've got the brass section, like that, playing that. The orchestration of this album is magnificent, and I was very impressed with Oasis and Morning Glory. And by the way, guys, I personally will be comparing this to Morning Glory throughout the episode, and that's not because I love The Great Escape, and that's not for me to shit on Oasis. It's because they both came out in '95. It was the Battle of Britpop, and these two albums came out in the same year, and I think it's right to compare them because you have two different sides of Britpop. Completely different sides, as we said, culturally, locationally, and even musically as well. And even, Yuko and Hero, that minimalistic sound, almost electronic, atmospheric, ambience, subtle, but with orchestration there that provides.
Don't you think there's something? Yeah, there's a similarity with Pet Sounds in a way that the band.
Wow,
the band is less relevant than the songs. Right? Wow. Am I right to say that,
bro? That's a comparison.
Because they don't bother much. They don't bother much about playing. And look at me playing my guitar riff. There's a couple of really good guitar tracks. There's all like there's amazing bass lines throughout the whole album. That's the one thing. The bass really brings life to the songs. But as a general rule, at some point, all you can hear is the orchestrations and the vocals. So it's almost like saying, we don't want to sound like a rock band.
That's an amazing shout, bro. I didn't even think about sort of comparing it to like, because I think you look at Britpop and naturally, I think you think, oh, well, it's not like classical music, is it? It's not as talented as that. People look at it as a bit of a second-rate kind of rock music. But when you've got people like Damon Albarn writing the music behind it and the rest of the band, I know they all contributed. That's a great shout, man. Yeah, and it very much feels like that. But also they collaborated with Stephen Street, who is their long-term producer. And when a band evolves and grows to the next stage and they know what they want, if you've got a producer there who is on side with you and on board with you and knows that you want to get to the next stage and knows what he or she has to do to drag you there with them, that's only a good thing, isn't it? Having a producer. It is.
And if you also, I think you got to put your ego aside if you want to do that, because if you want to produce an album like they did, is less about your playing, it's less about your music skills, it's less about you as a musician, and much more about the songwriting and the production. And if that's your focus, you got to let the producer shine. You can't be like, oh, well, this is my song, I don't want it to become something else. Because good producers will reshape the song, redesign the sounds, and turn into something completely different.
And I think, you're right. You need to give the producer that space, because that's his or her job as well.
Yeah,
you've done the songwriting, you've done the recording, it's all there, and obviously the band definitely has a say in how the song is produced or arranged. But you got to let this person do the job. And you
got to pick the right one, which they did.
Yeah. In terms of genre diversity and experimentation, this album really pushed the boundaries in terms of what was classed as a typical Britpop sound, because they did so much stuff that's unusual. For example, where are my notes? Dissonance. Dissonance galore. For those who have not heard, dissonance is one of my favorite words in music. So if you're a long-term listener or viewer, you've probably heard me say it loads of times. If you're new, dissonance means two notes that don't work together.
Basically jazz.
So if you're on a piano and you've got a white note, a black note, and a white note, play the white note and the black note one after the other, and it will sound horrible. That's called dissonance. When you play the white note next to the other white note with the black note in between, that's called consonance, because it sounds nice. Dissonance.
That was a really good explanation.
Thank you. I tried to keep it short.
If you don't know anything about music theory, that's just perfect. You can just visualize the theory. Well done, lad.
Stereotypes. The song stereotypes. You've got that section is so dissonant. I love it.
You've got to be brave to start an album with a melody.
I know. Country
track.
House. Country House, where has it got the distance? I've written it down. I can't exactly remember. The end of Top Man, there's distance, and Globe Alone. The guitars. It's almost like I think they are purposely playing it. Playing these notes together. Go on, say something. I'm going to listen to Country House.
Well, that's
sorry. The intro.
No, there's a couple of
So the intro, Country House. There. No, you're not playing a scale. It's just a chromatic.
It's a chromatic movement.
Again, starting off the second song of this Britpop album.
It feels to me like it feels to me like they want to keep you slightly annoyed throughout the whole album. Like this, even when the melody is beautiful, there's something in the background that's a bit dissonant. They're like, this doesn't sound quite right. Yeah, I think it's intentional, right? Now, Best Days is an interesting one because it's more clean in terms of music.
Can I ask you a question before you carry on?
Yeah.
Well, it's more of a statement that I hope you agree with. Everyone goes on about saying how, as a criticism of Oasis, Oasis, they just sound like the Beatles. Whereas I've never heard an Oasis song that I can say that really reminds me of the Beatles. Maybe in terms of the structure, chord progressions, whatever. Best Days.
It makes you feel like you're listening to the Beatles, but you can't really tell which song. Yeah.
I agree.
Oasis.
Okay. Yeah. But for me, Best Days is like a Beatles song. And I'll tell you which one it's like, For No One.
Oh wow.
It's just the
Yeah, man.
soft, not in terms of tempo or
Yeah.
key, just the
Yeah.
soft start, and then the little solo at the end that feels out of place. You know, that little horn solo in For No One.
Yeah. And then
I
you have a
can't
piano solo
I
in this one.
can't put my finger on why. I just heard this and thought this song, Best Days, is closer to any Beatles song than I've
Yeah.
ever heard an Oasis song be.
Well,
And
that's
that's not a criticism, it's just an observation. And sorry, before you carry on,
yeah.
any song we mention, for those of you listening and watching, we have a dedicated playlist dedicated to this episode where we put the full album on. It's a Spotify playlist. We put the full album in, and any other song we mention goes in the playlist. So already in there is Arnold Lane by Pink Floyd, which Felipe mentioned, and I'm going to stick For No One by the Beatles in there now, just so that whilst we mention a song, you can have a little listen and tell us whether you agree or disagree. Felipe, please carry on, bro.
Yeah, so with Best Days, I think there's an interesting conversation between the strings and the main melody. They almost overuse the strings on this one because they're not. It's not like extremely busy in terms of arrangement, but the strings are there all the time throughout the whole song. But it works as a conversation between the main melody, the vocal melody,
Bit
and the
Eleanor
strings.
Rigby, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. another Beatles reference. Yeah,
I think those first three songs are phenomenal.
And again, that's the one song I would say that doesn't sound like it's being played or written by a rock band. And I think you got to, if you feel that comfortable with your production to the point like we're going to do something that does not look or sound like a rock band, because they could even be like considered kind of pop punk.
Yeah,
punk,
that's
pop,
fair.
however you want to put it.
Look,
but in this album, they're not.
Well, yeah, I agree with you completely, but there are 2 or 3 songs that have a real ska and punk influence, and that's really important because in Britain in the, I think, is it the 70s or the 80s, where ska was a big thing. You had bands like Madness and the Specials doing their thing, and if you listen to a song like Fade Away, which has it's kind of offbeat, syncopated, upbeat tempo, but the biggest punk one is Globe Alone.
Globe Alone is a
faster,
great one.
punk inspired, aggressive, energetic. The end of Globe Alone is almost heavy metal. Like it's like it's just
it's punk, it's fast, it's short, and really fun. The thing with that one is like when I got to that point in the album, I felt like the album was going on for a bit too long. I'm not gonna lie. And
Bro,
I was like,
no, let's talk about that because I completely agree with you.
I thought the album could be 10 minutes shorter. Who am I to say that?
No, you're a consumer, man. You're a consumer, and I completely agree with you. And I'm not going to mince my words. I love this album, and I think this is the best Britpop album of all time. Wow. And we'll talk about the comparison with Morning Glory, whatever. However, lyrically, give me everything. I'll take all. How many is it? 15 songs.
They're all great lyrics.
That's my point. I'll take all the lyrics you want to give me. Musically, I could do without Dan Abnormal, Globe Alone, Entertain Me, maybe those 3 before Yuki and Hero.
But the one point I want to make about Globe Alone is like actually that one I like that one is right there, Globe Alone, because it brings them back to their roots. It's a bit more punk, and it's more like, okay, you know what? It's a 2-minute song just to make things slightly heavier at the very end of the album. I think that song is in a good place in the album, but the second half for me is not as entertaining as the first half.
Agreed. Yeah, but lyrically, it hits the
lyric
spot,
is all great, all of it.
I just want to like a very quick point about the song Top Man. I think it's just so fascinating how you've got that little vocal bass, and I don't mean bass, BASS, BASE. Is it like the hum, just going on? And then even the little bits like little, I got all my notes, little Arabic flourishes. So so when he says to something in the desert, it's got that tiny little bits that I just think is so special. You wouldn't have that. Pulp wouldn't do that. Oasis wouldn't do that. If Oasis mentioned the word, I don't know, let's go to Arabia, they wouldn't put in a little harmonic minor scale after. But Blur do. Do you know what I mean? This is why it's just fascinating, man. Blur and Oasis, complete opposite ends of the Britpop spectrum, but they are still both Britpop, aren't they? Just magnificent.
Well, and that's the thing with that era of music with Britpop. It's not one thing, isn't it? Britpop is not one thing.
We talk
about a lot of different styles.
we talk about in heavy metal, there's a couple of subgenres that you talk about where people argue, is it a genre or is it a movement? The first one is the new wave of British heavy metal.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like calling Iron Maiden new wave of British heavy metal is summarized as Nwabum. So a lot of people don't like calling Iron Maiden a Nwabum band. No, Iron Maiden heavy metal. Nwabum's just a movement, and new metal as well in the 90s. No, new metal's not a genre, it's just a movement.
Yeah.
Britpop's both, isn't it? Britpop is an obvious genre, but at the same time, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, it did symbolize that cultural movement in Britain in the 90s.
Exactly.
Excellent. What else have I got? Actually, just to finish off I've actually got two more points. Graham Coxon's guitar work, brilliant, isn't it? Because
his
I don't
rhythm
think
is great. He's so creative with rhythm.
I think when you think of Oasis, and again, this isn't to shit on Oasis or say this is better, that's better. Oasis and a bunch of other Britpop bands are so guitar driven. The guitar is the focal main point of the song.
Yeah.
Whereas Graham Coxon has really taken a back step. Don't get me wrong, the guitar is prevalent in a lot of the songs, but I always say my second favorite phrase after dissonance in music is less is more. It's not about the notes you play, it's about the space you leave.
Yeah.
And Graham Coxon not shoving his guitar in every song as loud as he can be. Songs like He Thought of Cars. His guitar is so restrained. It's in the background. It's atmospheric as well.
It's like another instrument in the orchestra, right?
Yeah,
when they have strings, the guitar is just like one more voice in the orchestra.
Perfectly put.
More than a leading instrument, isn't it?
Yeah, well done. And then finally, the melodic and harmonic complexity of the album, which I think is just fantastic. You know, they're known for their catchy melodies, but to put complex harmonies behind, let's take a look. Songs like, The Universal, really ambitious chord progression. It doesn't follow your standard 2-4-5-1 chord progression. In the Universal, they move between major keys and minor keys so smoothly. They really kind of pulls you up and then brings you down when it hits that minor key. Sweeping melodies, reminiscent of classic British pop songs, but the harmonic shifts keep it so unpredictable and entertaining.
Unpredictable is a good word for this album.
Really and Best Days as well. I think Best Days as well. You've got those that I'm trying to remember whether it's like, other people laugh at you when they say, then that chord is unusual. Boom, these are the best days of our lives. And it just sits there. Yeah. And it's tension because it's probably a seventh chord or a jazzy chord. And then it's just relieved beautifully when it goes back into the main melody again. I really like this album. I really do.
I can tell.
Yeah, there you go. You can tell when I do it. Anything else to talk about musically?
No. I have a question for the very end of it. But
okay, all right.
Answer anyway.
Okay, all right. Now we're going to just talk a little bit about Blur's evolution because I think it's important. Having addressed what we just addressed in the music, this is and we won't talk about this for too long. But Britpop was waning. We know this, and I think the Great Escape represents a pivotal moment in this position because I think Damon Albarn realized. Probably he's a very clever guy musically and sort of logic, knowledge wise. I think he knew that the change was coming, and that like grunge, because grunge essentially, it's debatable, but grunge had died already at this point. You still had your post grunge bands like Creed and Foo Fighters doing their thing, but Kurt Cobain had died. Grunge was such a small, quick movement in America, only lasted about 4 years. And I think, it was a bit too heavy for people, grunge. Not heavy musically, I mean lyrically, it weighted on people. It's depressing. As much as I love it, it's depressing and it's so melancholic. I think Damon Albarn saw that Britpop was declining and sort of started changing things up, using more electronic stuff, keyboards, samples, stuff like that. And I think because of this, he definitely embraced the lo-fi electronic soundscapes that he was using. And one of my favorite bands, I definitely put them in my top 20, Gorillaz, which was Damon Albarn's project after, he might have had others in between, but after Blur came Gorillaz. Yeah. And I hear things like Top Man, where
it's like he's preparing for that, isn't it?
Completely. But if you listen to Blur's album 13, which is in 1999, it's still another step between Great Escape, Gorillaz, 13 kind of sits there, and you can just hear it develop, and it is fantastic. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that a bit because I'm a massive Gorillaz fan. The song Top Man reminds me of a song called Fire Coming Out of the Monkey's Head by Gorillaz because of that use of the vocal. You know, we love having bass on we love having bass and drums as a base, BASE, of a song. But to have a vocal thing, like a vocal bass, to give the song its own structure, I think it's just brilliant.
Yeah, the vocal is the foundation of the song, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Let's move on and talk about finally the success and legacy of the album. So commercially, it was very successful. Continued Blur's rise to the top. Debuted at #1 on the UK album charts, sold over 1 million copies in the UK, certified triple platinum the year after, I believe. Country House, the lead single, also Universal, Charmless Man, Stereotypes, all did really well in the charts and for Blur. Now, outside the UK, Britpop didn't translate that well for Americans. They didn't really get it. The way that we sort of took in grunge, well, I suppose the other way really as well. You know, I know everyone loves Nirvana, but we didn't fully embrace grunge here. Our response to it was,
if you have a different cultural background, you don't feel those feelings in the same way.
Exactly.
So, and that's what music's all about in the end.
Yeah. Although it didn't translate to the US, it was quite successful in Europe. Critical reception, mostly positive reviews. You know, it praised the ambition, the musicality, the lyrics of it, the songwriting. Some people felt it was a little overproduced compared to their previous albums, but if you're comparing, I think they're different albums. You know, Park Life is.
I think they're meant to be different. It's meant to be overproduced.
Yeah. You know? But the legacy, I think, is the most important thing because it's the end of Britpop's golden era, and I feel like this album is that point. And like we said, although grunge essentially died when Kurt Cobain died, there was still a few albums released after. I think Britpop ended when this album came out. Obviously, you had things coming out.
And that's what they felt like as well. They said in interviews that they knew that was the end of Britpop.
Yeah. Culturally,
at least for them, that was the end of Britpop.
Yes, yeah.
They decided to end Britpop.
Great point.
Maybe that's what it is, isn't it? We're ending Britpop right now.
Yeah. Do you know what happened this week? You know, Coldplay have announced their retirement.
All right.
They've said after their 12th album, which comes out in a few months,
Didn't they say that before? It's like,
I'm not sure. I just thought that was
holding my breath here.
Yeah, well, you never know. Whenever they need some money, I'm sure there'll be another big tour.
Yeah.
But I just thought
like Kiss. Kiss did about 7 farewell tours.
Black Sabbath have done 2 as well, haven't they? You know?
Yeah. Scorpions, they're still going. I mean, they I think they were on a farewell tour. I'm pretty sure they were on a farewell tour 10 years ago. I'm sure about this. Yeah, but then they're still doing it. So I just don't trust. Should we celebrate or should we? I don't know.
I just thought it was interesting, you know, because Coldplay are a direct result of Britpop.
Yeah,
sort of late 90s, early 2000s, that kind of rock music. And I find, you know, it is a moment in time. Coldplay retiring, whether you like them or not. It is a moment in time. Actually, that is an era coming to an end. The Coldplay era.
It is. And
I'm not trying to blow smoke up their ass. They're not the only band doing it, but they are.
But they're the biggest band. They're the biggest band in the UK.
Exactly.
They have been the biggest band in the UK for the last, I don't know, 15 years or more.
Yeah, definitely. Cultural impact, as I said, you know, songs like Country House and the Universal remain iconic tracks that really sort of bring you back to that 90s. Battle of Britpop, massive moment for it, as we know, and the influence on Britpop as well. You know, as you said, other bands experimented after this and said, well, let's see what we can do. If Blur are using samples and synthesizers, let's see what we can do. So it really did open up the avenue for many bands, and it is a truly significant album. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
You had a question?
That's it. I have a question, yeah. Simple one. Has been asked a million times. Blur or Oasis?
Blur for me. And I know I started the Oasis album. For those who haven't listened to the Oasis episode, go back and listen to it. Everything we've done with Great Escape, we did with What's the Story Morning Glory, which is why we've done the Great Escape so soon after, because we wanted that little comparison. I do not like Oasis. I don't like them. The majority of their music I don't like. But on that album, I think you can admit I gave it its dues. I was very fair with it. But for me, I always... And I said on the episode, Don't Look Back in the Anger is one of the best ever songs released by a British band, pop music, rock music, whatever you want to categorize it as. It is fantastic.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear that much of a. I want to be careful what I say because I do appreciate Oasis. There is a sophistication and a complexity around The Great Escape.
Yeah.
Even though it's simple in nature, every song has something going on in the back of your ear, whether it's a little horn line or Graham Coxon's guitar playing a little melody, or even that little Arabic thing I said, he goes into the desert, like just little embellishments that I think takes this album above any other. They've thought about it a lot, and maybe that's what Oasis are about. Maybe they are just about rock and roll. Let's plug in, we'll record it live, do some overdubs if we need, whatever, and that is fine with me. I'm happy with it. I'm happy the Oasis fans love it. I'm happy the world love Oasis. But for me, I don't actually feel Blur get enough credit for this album, or maybe in the career, because
I get it. They could be, you know, more famous worldwide. You think, although they are, you know, they're successful all over the world. But I understand where you're coming. Yeah, same question.
Yeah, for you. Well, first one, Great Escape or What's the Story, Morning Glory?
Oh, tough one. Can I call it a draw? I like
that. Yeah, I'll take that. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
Blur or Oasis.
Can't tell. Oasis.
Okay, fair enough.
Because I like the feeling of like a garage band. Two guitars, bass, drums, someone shouting on the microphone.
And that's fair. It's
easier for me to never get tired of that than it is to listen to a lot of complex arrangements and stuff. I love listening to, let's put it, clever music like The Great Escape. And I love the fact that Blur has changed throughout the years. But I love a rock band that is just four guys with their guitars and drums and just you know, as John Lennon said, I think there was an interview with Dave Bowie that he mentioned that he asked John Lennon, like, how does he write songs and stuff, and John Lennon said, just write about whatever you're feeling at the moment and put a backbeat to it, and that's it.
And that sums up Oasis, doesn't it? But
which
Oasis
so that's
did
more
it better.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that's more my kind of music, my cup of tea. But again, you can't take the merit out of any of those two bands. They're both amazing in what they do.
But I don't feel like you've actually given your opinion about this album. Do you like it? Do you think it's great?
I liked it. Okay? I liked it.
Yeah,
I think it's great. I think there's I really admire when people work on the detail of every song. Everything has been thought through in this album. I think from the lyrics to the arrangements to the, you know, placement of guitar voices and bass and drums and everything. I think it's really, really clever. That's the best word, I think, to describe the album. And I love the lyrical content. I just think it's not my cup of tea, but I really enjoyed listening to the album, the start to finish. I think it's a great experience. I
think you summed it up best when you said it's not considered a concept album, but it is. Like,
it is. Yeah,
you know, we'll
it is and it isn't. And I think that the fact that it's not meant to be. How can I put it? It's not meant to be crystal clear in terms of what they intend to say. That's great. You know, I like it.
Excellent.
Cool.
Right, should we finish off with my monologue?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer than usual, this one, but what can you expect when I do albums I love? So, Blur have always been slightly outside the standard we were used to for Britpop, from the electronic grunge feel of Repetition on their first album to the funky, chic-inspired Girls and Boys on Parklife. But The Great Escape turned this idea of normal Britpop completely on its head. Whereas most bands were guitar-driven, Blur sought to use other instruments and electronic synths as a basis for some of these songs. Whereas most bands kept production and instrumentation raw and to a minimum, Blur expanded with lush orchestral arrangements and highly executed production methods. And, most importantly, whereas most bands were celebrating British life, morals and values, Blur were questioning the authenticity and the reality of it all. I think Britpop was a temporary bubble, as we saw from its short lifespan and its American counterpart in grunge, a reaction to a new political landscape and a renewed feeling of optimism and national pride, and Blur took it upon themselves to burst that bubble. Tracks like Best Days and Ernald Same illustrate feelings of wasted potential and suburban life's monotony. Country House and Charmless Man satirize the British upper class. He Thought of Cars and The Universal delve into mental health and emotional struggles, while Stereotypes and It Could Be You criticize consumerism and conformity. Musically, the album is filled to the brim with ambitious orchestration, genre of diversity, and melodic/harmonic complexity, which completely push the boundaries of Britpop, while simultaneously sounding completely appropriate and at home with the Britpop moniker. I love how the unusual elements, the dissonance, the unnerving electronic soundscapes, the punk, ska, metal elements, makes us a little uncomfortable and perfectly symbolizes the changing cultural landscape of mid-1990s Britain. In the Battle of Britpop debate, you all know I'm no fan of Oasis, but have given them their credit and dues. However, when I compare The Great Escape to What's the Story Morning Glory, I see a world of difference in songwriting quality, artistic ambition, and musical execution. Maybe that's the point of Oasis. Maybe they are no-nonsense, rock and roll, loud guitars with Liam Gallagher's signature vocals singing their anthemic choruses. But Blur show a musical sophistication that I don't think can be rivaled in that era of music, and they go on to back it up with future albums and future projects. I've always had a soft spot for Blur. For me, they've always been the best and my favourite of the Britpop bands, and diving deep into The Great Escape has only further confirmed to me that they are the creme de la creme of this category, and this album is Britpop at its finest.
Well said. Can I add something to it?
Oh, please, bro, go ahead.
I think
monologue continued.
Yeah, I think Blur is the band that took Britpop to another level, and they intentionally killed it before it was too late.
Oh, yes. What was it? I'm trying to remember what band we were doing, where we said that band pushed the other band, and they released Beach Boys and Beatles in the 60s.
Exactly. Yeah,
and how there wasn't any animosity, but Brian Wilson heard Sgt. Pepper, and he was like, I've got to write something like that, and it pushed it. I wonder if What's the Story Morning Glory would have been as good if they didn't have Blur do Park Life. I wonder if The Great Escape would have been as good had they not heard What's the Story Morning Glory before.
Yeah.
Just
there's even a reference to it, you know. And it is.
Oh, go on, tell us.
Well, they say Morning Glory, not maybe as a reference to the album.
There you go.
Country House, isn't it? Yeah.
What's the story? The Morning Glory. Yeah. You're right.
It's a reference. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Anything else to say?
No, I just want to thank everyone for listening to us again. Yeah. And we got new logo, we got loads of new stuff, and I'm really excited about the future of the podcast. I'm really happy that people have been with us all this time.
I think, we as Felipe said, we've rebranded and we've got awesome looking new logo and some new visuals on our YouTube, and even if you look on the podcast apps, it all looks fantastic. There's constant growth in the podcast. We love what we do, but we've always said, the whole reason we do this podcast is because myself and Felipe, we've toured the world with a bunch of different artists, and all of them have said to us, we'll be in the car talking about an album, and one artist thought we were having an argument because I was like, Felipe, man, Black Sabbath is metal. Laz, no, mate, it's hard rock. And we have these debates and these discussions about music that actually put some of the artists we played for on edge. Like, guys, calm down. And we're like, no, this is fine. This is just what we do. But every time we've been in a tour van or a car and we're discussing it, people are like, you guys, your discussions are fascinating. And that's exactly why we started the podcast. If we do an episode and it only gets one listen and we've changed someone's outlook on an album or a band because of that one listen, we've done our job. And I'm happy, and I can go to bed at night thinking we've served a purpose.
And if we can convince you guys to have a listen to some of the most iconic albums in rock history, that would be great too. So this is about like getting to know new music or old music.
Well, that's one of our
and also listening to something that you liked in the past and you don't remember, or you haven't listened to that band in a while. Yeah. And anyway, whatever suggestions you guys have or comments, please just drop us a line and we'll be happy to get in touch and maybe talk about an album suggested by you.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're listening on Apple and Spotify, guys, please scroll down, give us a little review. It does us the world of good. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. All of that stuff, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, follow us so that you can stay up to date with our latest episodes.
Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
As usual, guys, take care and long live rock and roll.